Nora adjusted the hem of her navy sheath dress, smoothing it over her curves as she glanced at her reflection. She and David were joining his family tonight, an annual tradition that, to an outsider, painted them as the golden couple. He'd already left for the car, briefcase in hand, lips curved in that practiced smile. But Nora knew that smile hid the storm that waited for her once the front door clicked shut. "Ready?" David's voice was smooth as silk, betraying nothing. "As ready as I'll ever be," Nora lied, forcing her lips upwards. Their drive to the Duncans' mansion was silent. David's silence was punishment level 1. He didn't need to raise his voice. The tension in his jaw said enough. When they arrived, his family greeted Nora with warmth she couldn't match. Mrs. Duncan enveloped her in a perfumed hug. "You look radiant, dear." "Thank you, Mrs. Duncan," Nora managed. David's mother winked at her son, pride shining in her eyes. He nodded, chest puffed. "Perfect." Dinner commenced under crystal chandeliers. Conversation swirled around school achievements and vacation plans. Nora sipped her iced tea, eyes flitting between plates shimmering with salmon tartare and duck confit. She tried to join in, asked about David's new project, but he cut her off. "I'll tell you later," he said curtly, turning his attention to his sister. She swallowed, stung by his dismissal, but the room buzzed on. Laughter erupted at one of Mr. Duncan's jokes. Nora forced a laugh too, lips quivering. As dessert arrived, a raspberry mousse, Nora felt the old ache settle in her chest. She thought back to their wedding day, the vows they whispered under pink petals. Back then, his silences had seemed mysterious. Now they felt like weapons. "David," she ventured, voice low. "Can we talk?" He glanced at her, brows knitting. "Not now." The knife clattered onto her plate. "Not now. After 9 years. Not now means never." Heat flared behind his eyes. "Watch your tone," he warned, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Nora's heart pounded. Around them, guests continued oblivious. She realized what he'd become, a man who wielded control like armor. After dinner, David led her to the drawing room. His father dozed in an armchair, his mother sipped digestive. Nora opened her mouth, determined to speak truth, but he stopped her with a look ice cold. He stood, loomed over her. "Enough," he said. He grabbed her upper arm, squeezing until she gasped. "Let go," she rasped. His grip tightened. Her pulse thundered. At that moment, his face shifted, smile flickering, apologetic. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She pulled away, chest heaving. "Sorry isn't enough." He exhaled, brushing a stray curl from her face. For a split second, she saw the man she married. Then he hardened again. "You'll learn your place." She stepped back, staring into those storm clouds. "I won't." He leaned in, voice barely audible. "Be careful, Nora." And with that, he strode off, leaving her trembling beneath the chandelier's glow. The mask had slipped. The real battle had just begun. Nora woke the next morning to a corridor of echoes, her own footsteps against polished marble. David was gone. No goodbye. No note. He'd left early, she suspected, fueled by anger from last night's clash. She dressed quietly, the weight of dread pressing at her chest. She descended the stairs into the kitchen. His mother hummed over toast and tea, smiling at Nora's arrival. "Good morning, dear." Nora forced a smile. "Morning." But words stuck in her throat. Her phone lay silent. No missed calls, no messages from David. A dull ache settled in her chest. He had cut her off entirely. She set a plate of fruit on the table. "Thank you," she whispered. His mother tilted her head. "Something's wrong." Nora hesitated, then shook her head. "Just a rough night." Mrs. Duncan reached across the table, patting her hand. "Chin up, dear." Nora nodded mechanically, biting her lip to hold back tears. She recalled how David had once charmed her with gentle words, roses, stolen kisses. Now those gestures felt hollow. She fled to their bedroom, dialing her friend Marissa. After the third ring, Marissa picked up. "Nora, you okay?" Nora paused, voice trembling. "He slapped me." Silence. Then Marissa's breath caught. "Oh my God. He apologized. Said I'd learn my place. I'm on my way." Nora pressed the phone to her ear, tears slipping free. Please don't. I'll stay until you're safe. She ended the call and stared at the gathering storm clouds outside their window. Memories flashed. The first time she fell asleep in his arms, his laughter echoing in empty halls, the promise that she'd always be cherished. But last night had shattered that illusion. Now silence was his punishment. Hours passed. No text, no call, only the hum of the city beyond their estate walls. By afternoon, she couldn't stand it. She grabbed her purse and keys, slipping out the back door. The world beyond their gates felt foreign. Traffic snarled. Vendors shouted. Life pulsed unchecked. She realized how isolated she'd become, cocooned by his control. She hailed a cab and directed it to Marissa's apartment. On the ride, she watched her reflection in the window, eyes red, hair mussed. She recognized the woman of moments ago, caged behind a veneer of polish. Now she glimpsed the cage's bars. At Marissa's door, she hesitated, then knocked. Moments later, her friend flung the door open. Marissa enveloped her in a hug. You're safe. Nora closed her eyes, letting the tears come. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel anger and relief intertwined. In the living room, Marissa poured 2 glasses of wine. Tell me everything. Nora exhaled, gathering courage. He's always controlled me with silence. But last night, he slapped me in front of his family. Marissa's jaw clenched. That's abuse, Nora. You deserve better. Nora nodded against her friend's shoulder. I know. Marissa placed a hand under her chin. You'll get through this. Nora met her gaze, determination flaring. I won't be silent anymore. Nora spent the night on Marissa's couch, cocooned in blankets and old movie marathons. Morning light filtered through curtains, and with it came clarity. She could no longer tolerate this life. But leaving meant uprooting everything. Her home, her routine, her dreams. She ran a hand through her hair. She heard the click of her phone. A message from David, where are you? Nora's fingers hovered. She typed, safe. We need to talk. Then deleted it. She couldn't face him yet. At brunch, Marissa laid out options, shelters, lawyers, financials. We'll figure this out. Tears welled. I have no idea where to start. Marissa handed her a folder. I met with Jenna, the divorce attorney. She can get you an order of protection if you need it. Nora inhaled. Protection. Marissa nodded. You're not alone. They talked until noon. Nora's phone buzzed again, David calling. She ignored it. Later, she returned to her apartment to gather essentials. The house felt eerie. His cologne lingered in corners. His ties draped over chairs. She packed photos of happier times, her favorite novels, her grandmother's necklace. Each item felt like a piece of her puzzle to be pieced back together. As she zipped the suitcase, the front door creaked. Heart pounding, she spun around. David stood there, eyes wide with alarm. He looked smaller, vulnerable. Nora, his voice cracked. Where are you? She crossed her arms. You know. He swallowed. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough, she said, voice steady. Not for violence. His face darkened. You made me look weak. I made him see your truth, she whispered, remembering that slap. I saw it too. David took a step forward. Come home. Nora shook her head. I can't. Not like this. She turned, picking up her suitcase. Goodbye, David. He lunged, grabbing her arm. Don't. She yanked free, suitcase swinging. Let go. She stormed past him, pain and rage tangled in her chest. David called after her. She didn't look back. That evening, David's parents hosted a small dinner. Rumors had spread that Nora left. He glared across the table at empty place settings meant for her. Mrs. Duncan frowned. Are you sure she's all right? He forced a smile. She just needed space. His sisters exchanged glances. One bit her lip. Mr. Duncan cleared his throat. David, this might be harder than you think. Silence draped the room. David clenched his fork. I did what I had to. Mrs. Duncan's voice trembled. Spouses shouldn't hurt each other. He slammed his hand on the table. Crystal rattled. She provoked me. Her mother's face fell. "Child, that's not provocation." He stared at the table, jaw tight, then rose abruptly. "I'm going for a walk." He stalked out, leaving tension choking the air. Outside, the sky spilled dawn's purple hues. He walked without direction, mind swirling. He saw her face, defiant, wounded. She had poured wine over his head in front of everyone. That image haunted him more than any bruise. He stopped before a shop window. His reflection stared back, haggard from sleepless nights, eyes rimmed red. He realized he'd lost control. And with it, the only thing that mattered, Nora. He pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over her number. Regret surged, but pride clenched his throat. He scrolled through their messages, once tender, now cold. A memory surfaced, their first kiss under rain-drenched streetlights, her laughter spilling over his umbrella, the promise they made. Always. He swiped, deleted her number. Pain twisted in his chest. He'd driven her away. Now he chased ghosts. Nora stood at a pawnshop counter, hand trembling as she placed her wedding ring on the glass. The jeweler glanced up. "You sure?" She pressed her palms against the counter. "I need cash." He nodded, sliding the ring under a light. "It's beautiful." She stared at its simplicity, tiny diamond set in white gold. It had once symbolized love. Now it felt like shackles. Back at a bench in the park, she cradled the envelope of bills. Autumn leaves twirled at her feet. She unfolded a crumpled photo of her wedding day. David's proud smile as she walked toward him. She closed her eyes, letting tears come. A small voice interrupted her reverie. "Are you okay?" She looked up at a stray boy, no older than 8, offering her half-eaten granola bar. His clothes were threadbare, backpack torn. She forced a smile. "I'm getting there." He sat beside her. "My mom says people need help." Nora's chest tightened. "She's right." He popped the wrapper back in his pocket. "You seem sad." She nodded. "Big changes." He shrugged. "I moved here last week." She offered him the granola bar. "Thank you." He bit into it, crumbs on his lips. "You look like you lost something." She blinked. "Something like that." He pointed to her ring envelope. "Is that money?" She looked away. "Yes." He frowned. "Why pawn it?" She considered lying, but the boy deserved honesty. "It belonged to someone who hurt me. I'm selling it to build a new life." He nodded solemnly. "My mom says you can't fix the past, but you can make the next part better." Her throat tightened. The wisdom of a child, unburdened by pride. She nodded. "Thank you." He stood, dusting off his jeans. "Good luck." Then he scampered away. Nora watched him go, wind kissing her cheeks. She tucked the photo in her purse. With new resolve, she rose. The past was gone, and today, she began rewriting her future. Nora woke the next morning on Jenna's leather couch, sunlight filtering through half-open blinds and sending golden ribbons across the coffee table. She stretched, heart pounding as bruiseless cheeks caught the light. She no longer carried his ring. Its absence felt both invigorating and terrifying. She reached for her phone and stared at Jenna's contact, her attorney, a divorce specialist recommended by Marissa. Her palms tingled with both dread and exhilaration. Today she would take her first stand in court. She slipped into her navy blazer, buttoning it over a simple white blouse, and laced her boots. Each click on the hallway's tile echoed determination. This day would mark a turning point. No more silences, no more threats, no more hiding behind forced smiles. She would fight. She would win. Freedom waited beyond that courtroom door. She arrived at downtown legal lift, where the receptionist smiled sympathetically and handed her a clipboard. Jenna emerged moments later, mid-30s, sleek bob, eyes sharp yet compassionate. "Nora, welcome," she said, ushering her into a glass-walled office overlooking the city skyline. The attorney motioned to a leather chair. Nora sat, knees trembling. Jenna spread Nora's documents on the desk, marriage certificate, photos of bruises, text transcripts, and a police report from the night before. "This is strong evidence," Jenna said, running a finger along each sheet. "We'll request a restraining order immediately and file for divorce on grounds of abuse and abandonment." Nora exhaled. Each word felt like a blow to the past. This was real. I want my life back, she whispered. Jenna nodded. And you will have it. After the appointment, Nora found herself standing on a crowded sidewalk, papers clutched in her hand, the city's hum of comfort. She spotted a newsstand selling fresh flowers, tiny white lilies that reminded her of peace. She bought a single stem and tucked it into her blazer pocket, a talisman against despair. As she boarded the train home, she watched commuters rush by, each lost in their own world. She felt, unusually, connected, as though her own struggle formed part of the city's pulse. She pulled out her phone and texted Marissa. First step done. Feels surreal. Seconds later, Marissa replied with a heart emoji. Nora smiled at the small affirmation. It wasn't over, but she had begun rewriting her story. That evening, Nora returned to Jenna's apartment, her temporary sanctuary, where Marissa greeted her with homemade soup and worried eyes. They settled on the couch, and Nora laid out the process. Hearing date, order of protection hearing, asset division, and potential alimony. He won't see it coming, Nora said quietly. Marissa frowned. He's dangerous, remember. Stay vigilant. Nora nodded, every caution weighed on her. As they ate, Marissa's phone buzzed, David calling. Nora left the room. She stared at his name on the screen and, with surprising calm, hit ignore. She swallowed hard. Every call, every message from him now carried a threat and a chain. She would not be chained again. Tonight she would sleep without fear. Before bed, Nora stood by the window, gazing at the city lights, shimmering like distant hopes. She pressed the lily to her heart, inhaling its sweet scent. The months ahead promised battles in courtroom corridors, possible confrontations, and nights of tears. But she felt an ember of courage glowing brighter than fear. She turned away from the window and unrolled a yoga mat. Tonight she would practice breathing, center herself. As she eased into a stretch, she realized that rebuilding would require patience, strategy, and self-compassion. Yet, beneath the ache in her chest, excitement stirred. Her life would be her own. And in that promise, she found her first true smile in years. 2 days later, the courthouse waiting room buzzed with chatter and shuffling papers. Nora sat beside Jenna, legs crossed and documents neatly stacked on her lap. Every so often, she glanced at the entrance. When David arrived, flanked by a high-profile attorney and 2 silent bodyguards, Nora's pulse quickened. He looked composed, tailored suit, perfectly combed hair, yet his eyes flashed a cold fury. He passed her with a hard look that promised retribution. Nora exhaled slowly, hands wrapped around her file. No reaction. Jenna squeezed her shoulder. Remember, stay calm. She nodded. The hearing would decide whether she remained under his shadow or stepped into daylight. Inside the courtroom, time drifted between motions and objections until the judge called Nora to testify. Heart thundering, she took the stand and recounted the slaps, the isolation, and the fear. She described the last dinner, where humiliation ended in violence. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. When David's attorney cross-examined her, he unleashed a barrage of insinuations that she was unstable, seeking publicity, even fabricating her story for sympathy. His words stung, but Nora held her gaze forward. "Is your client claiming you provoked him?" the judge asked. Nora shook her head. "I only begged him not to humiliate me." Silence stretched, then the judge's gavel rapped the bench. Jenna's eyes met Nora's as the judge granted a temporary restraining order. No contact, no proximity under 300 feet, and scheduled the next divorce hearing. Relief washed over Nora in a warm rush. She sank into her chair, tears pricking her eyes. David's face tightened. His attorney bolted upright, whispering urgent instructions. Outside the courtroom, photographers tucked away their cameras. This was a closed hearing. Friends and strangers alike offered Nora nods of support. Jenna gathered the papers and patted Nora's hand. "You did it." Nora exhaled, the weight of months lifting as she realized the law now protected her. Moments later, as Nora stepped into the hallway, David appeared, escorted by bailiffs to ensure compliance. His stride faltered when he saw her. He stopped, then advanced, dissident anger radiating from his stance. "Nora," he hissed, voice low, "when this is over, you'll regret it." His words slipped through the bailiff's grip, sending a chill down her spine. She met his gaze evenly. "I regret nothing." Her voice carried across the corridor. He flinched as if stung. Without another word, he turned and strode away. Nora watched his retreating form, heart pounding. Her safety was not guaranteed, but her courage had crystallized. That evening, Marissa met her outside the courthouse, cheering with a bouquet of wildflowers. "You're unstoppable," she declared, hugging Nora tightly. They walked to a nearby cafe, and Nora sipped chamomile tea while recapping the hearing. The cafe's warm lamps and soft chatter felt comforting. For the first time, Nora believed in her new reality, a life free from fear and shame. Yet she understood the road ahead would demand resilience. David's fury would echo in motions, countersuits, and public whispers. But Nora felt armored by justice and her own conviction. No more slips. No more apologies. This time, she would not back down. Nora stepped into her new apartment on Elm Street, the door's fresh paint glimmering under a pale winter sun. She paused to inhale the scent of new carpeting and primer. Empty walls gaped at her like blank pages. Yet the emptiness felt liberating. This space would bear no witness to violence or cruelty. She opened the tall windows, letting the city's chill air breathe life into the rooms. With her suitcase settled in one corner, she wandered through the modest living room, kitchen, and bedroom, already envisioning each corner transformed by her own touch. This apartment would be her sanctuary, a refuge from the past she was determined to leave behind. Over the next 2 days, Nora painted the living room in a soft of gray and the bedroom walls in muted sage. She carefully hung her grandmother's necklace, a silver locket filled with black and white photos, above her dresser as a talisman of resilience. She assembled a small bookshelf and lined it with favorite novels and framed snapshots of childhood summers. In the kitchen, she baked cinnamon rolls for the neighbors, letting the aroma waft through the hall. Each brushstroke and rolling pin twist felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. With each decorative touch, she stitched patches of bravery onto the empty canvas of her new home. On the third morning, the doorbell chimed. Nora opened it to greet her neighbor Madeline, an elderly woman in a knitted shawl, holding fresh jam and a plate of scones. "Welcome, dear." Madeline smiled, her blue eyes soft behind glasses. "Just thought you might like a homemade treat." Nora accepted the gift, gratitude welling. "Thank you. I'm Nora." They chatted about building quirks and recommended local shops. Madeline's warmth felt like a remedy, a quiet reassurance that community could be kind. Nora realized she hadn't known genuine neighborly care in years. As Madeline left, the scones beckoning from the counter, Nora felt something bud within her, a sense she might not just survive, but heal. Later that afternoon, as she laid out her teacup and novel, an envelope slipped under her door. Her hands trembled as she opened it. A new lawsuit from David's counsel, claiming defamation and financial damages from the restraining order hearing. They demanded her bank statements and personal correspondence. Anxiety skittered through her chest. She sank onto her couch, clutching the letter like an echo of his wrath. But beneath the fear, she recognized the tactic, a desperate bid to intimidate her. She closed her eyes, inhaled slowly, and reminded herself of the courthouse victory and Jenna's advice. Gather evidence, document everything, and do not respond in anger. That night, Nora lit candles in the living room, their flicker dancing across the newly painted walls. She placed the legal summons on the coffee table beside Jenna's business card. Instead of dread, she felt determination. This apartment was her fortress. No paper or threat could destroy it. She poured tea into her favorite mug and wrapped herself in a soft throw, the faint scent of paint replaced by chamomile and candle wax. Through the window, the distant hum of traffic sounded like a heartbeat in the calm. Tomorrow, she would meet with Jenna again and prepare her defense. Tonight, she would rest in her sanctuary unafraid. Nights in the new apartment carried their own challenges. On her third sleepless evening, Nora sat cross-legged on the bed, with only a dim lamp casting shadows on the sage walls. The silence pressed in, and her thoughts raced back to David's furious glare, the slap echoing like thunder in her ears. She clutched her grandmother's locket, heart pounding. Memories of her wedding day laughter and the initial months of their marriage flickered in taunts. Love turned venom. She sank back against the headboard, wrapping the throw tighter as tears blurred her vision. Darkness felt heavy in this empty room. Then she recalled Jenna's words, "Healing takes a village." She rose, wiping her cheeks, and found Jenna's business card with the next support group meeting's date. That morning, Nora stepped into the Willow Community Center's multipurpose room, wooden floors polished by decades of events. Chairs formed a circle around a low table, where coffee and tea waited. 8 women and 2 men sat quietly, eyes reflecting stories Nora recognized, hurt and hope intertwined. A facilitator with gentle eyes welcomed new members and invited introductions. Hard hammering, Nora hesitated, then spoke. "I'm Nora. I'm here because I'm rebuilding after abuse." Murmurs of support rippled through the circle. A woman with short curls touched her arm. "You're safe here." She exhaled, relief mingling with anxiety. This was the first time she'd spoken openly of her pain. As the session progressed, others shared. A teacher who left an alcoholic spouse, a nurse recovering from betrayal, a graduate student who endured emotional manipulation. Their voices rose and fell, weaving a tapestry of struggle and survival. When it was Nora's turn, she described the slap at the family dinner, David's smothering control, and her decision to walk away. Her voice wavered but held steady. Tears slid down cheeks, but she continued. Silence enveloped the room as she finished. Then, one by one, participants nodded, some with tears in their eyes. The facilitator spoke. "Your story matters, Nora. You matter." In that affirmation, a spark ignited within her. After the meeting, Nora lingered while others filtered out. She found a small circle of women offering tissues and warm smiles. They exchanged numbers, promising coffee and check-ins. Outside, a crisp breeze rustled fallen leaves. Nora inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with autumn air. She realized she wasn't alone. Each shared story had honed her own resolve. The wound in her chest felt less raw, more manageable. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to Marissa. "I found a place I belong." Then she penned a note to Jenna. "Support group helps. Thanks." With each new connection, the loneliness slipped away, replaced by a sense that life still held compassion. That evening, Nora returned to her apartment with a small pot of jasmine tea and the group's printed affirmations. She placed them on the coffee table next to the summons and her grandmother's locket. She lit another candle and sat at her desk, opening a fresh journal. On the first page, she wrote, "I am not broken." She recounted the support group's moments, voices of resilience and hope. She closed her eyes and visualized a life rebuilt on honesty and courage. Across the page, she penned, "Tomorrow, I walk forward." Folding the journal shut, she felt a gentle calm settle over her. Outside her window, city lights shimmered like distant promises. She was no longer alone in the dark. The sun crept over the horizon as Nora boarded the 7:30 bus, her worn leather satchel slung over her shoulder. The morning chill nudged her awake, but her heartbeat thrummed with anticipation. Today was her first day back at work at a boutique marketing agency. Her old team had hired her part-time, eager for her creative spark. She settled into a window seat, earbuds in, playing her favorite playlist. Commuters shuffled around her, preoccupied with phones and take-out coffee cups. Yet Nora felt present, engaged, alive. Each stop on the route seemed to whisper possibility. She inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp air and the glimpse of a life rebuilt on her own terms. At the agency's loft-style office, she greeted familiar faces: Jared, the copywriter with a quick smile; Felicia, the art director whose sketches lined the studio walls; Nora, "Welcome back," they chorused. Jenna, no relation, offered a thumbs up from across a conference table. Nora took a seat, laid out her notebook, and joined the morning meeting. As clients' campaigns scrolled on the projector screen, she offered insights on social trends and storytelling angles. Her voice carried confidence. When a senior partner praised her analysis, satisfaction bloomed in her chest. She realized how much she missed collaborative energy and creative problem-solving. By mid-morning, she felt invincible. During lunch at a nearby cafe, Nora scrolled through her encrypted email. A message from her former co-worker, Daniel, blinked in the inbox. "I heard what happened. If you're interested, I have a passion project, a nonprofit campaign, that could use your talent." Nora's breath caught. She dreamed of pro bono work that felt meaningful. She typed back enthusiastically, arranging to meet after work. The thought of channeling her skills toward something that mattered filled her with purpose. She sipped her smoothie, and the tang of berries felt like a promise. Her professional life would no longer be a cage, but a canvas for impact. Her afternoon ended with a flurry of tasks: drafting a pitch deck, annotating design layouts, and coordinating client feedback. As she packed her laptop, her phone buzzed. Another summons from David's attorney, this time demanding bank statements from her new job. Her stomach clenched at the reminder of the legal gauntlet she still faced. She forwarded the message to Jenna with a curt, "Here's their latest." Jenna replied, "Ignore it. I'll handle the response." Relief washed over Nora. She could focus on work, while Jenna defended her in the shadows. She closed her eyes and exhaled. There would always be external battles, but today she seized internal victories. That evening, Marissa greeted her at a cozy wine bar. Soft jazz drifting around, dim lights casting golden hues on wooden tables. "To your first day back," Marissa toasted, lifting her glass. Nora mirrored the motion, her cheeks warm. They clinked glasses and sipped red wine. "I got another project," Nora said, voice bright. "A nonprofit campaign." Marissa's eyes shone. "You're unstoppable." They shared a plate of charcuterie, laughter mingling with music. As candlelight danced across Nora's face, she felt a profound gratitude. The slap, the silence, the courtroom. Each had been a crucible forging her freedom. Now, seated among friends, she tasted the sweetness of autonomy. This was her first real sip of life renewed. Nora arrived early at the courthouse, the winter chill biting through her coat. She clutched her folder, financial records, witness statements, lease agreements, each page a testament to the life she'd rebuilt. Today's hearing would address asset division, the house she'd fled, joint bank accounts, and shared investments she'd never consented to. David sat across the room, flanked by his attorney, posture rigid, eyes fixed on her. No glance of remorse, only cold determination. Nora inhaled and met his stare squarely. Justice didn't depend on his regret. It depended on facts and her unshakable resolve. The judge entered, robes whispering across marble floors. He called the case, and David's attorney opened with fervor. "Your Honor, Mrs. Duncan claims sole ownership of several assets. Yet these were acquired jointly, and she abandoned them without justification." It was the same tactic. Blame her for leaving. Jenna rose calmly. "Your Honor, Mrs. Duncan was coerced and threatened. She relinquished control under duress. Our evidence will demonstrate the abuse she endured, invalidating her abandonment." Nora's heart pounded as Jenna laid out a timeline. The nights David forbade her from signing checks, the forced transfers he made in secret, the threats she endured if she contested his spending. David's eyes flicked to the screen where an email thread appeared. David reprimanding Nora for asking questions about monthly statements. His attorney sputtered, calling the exchange harsh but not criminal. Jenna countered with evidence of his violence and isolation, then presented bank records showing his unilateral transfers to offshore accounts. Nora watched the judge's forehead crease. Somewhere in those lines he'd see the truth behind David's facade. Cross-examination was brutal. David took the stand, claiming Nora overreacted, that the bruises she documented were from slips or accidental knocks. Nora's stomach lurched, but she steadied herself, recalling the exact moment, the slap at dinner. Jenna guided her gently out of the gallery to review notes. When Nora returned to testify, her voice was firmer. She described the hush of David's violence, the way he erased her sense of self, and her courage in fleeing. "Your Honor, fear is a powerful weapon," she said, gaze unwavering. After hours of testimony, the judge retired to chambers. The silence that followed felt like dawn, tense but hopeful. When he returned, he issued a ruling. Temporary control of joint assets would transfer to a neutral trustee, pending final judgment. David's jaw clenched. Jenna squeezed Nora's hand. It wasn't a final victory, but it was freedom growing roots. As they left, Nora felt the weight lift off her shoulders, a burden no longer hers alone to bear. Outside, Marissa enveloped her in a hug, tears in her eyes. Nora closed hers, breathing in the cold air. Justice was imperfect, but today it bent toward truth. David's shadows would persist, but Nora's light had pierced them, and the courtroom would keep witness to her unwavering stand. Late that night, Nora unpacked boxes in her apartment. Most were filled, books, clothes, mementos of her new life. One box, however, sat unopened on the floor, a box of photographs and letters from before she met David. The sight of her college graduation photo sent a pang through her chest. She knelt and unsealed the lid, fingers trembling. Out tumbled jetting passports, birthday cards, snapshots of her and Marissa laughing under streetlights. Each image reminded her of who she'd been, vibrant, hopeful, and unbroken. She spread the photos on the coffee table under soft lamplight. One showed her hiking along the coast with her father, now gone to illness. Another showed a yellow birthday cake smothered in frosting, candle flame caught mid-flicker. Her throat tightened. David had erased this Nora, replacing her world with his controlled version. Tears fell as she fingered a letter from her mother. "Stay strong, my girl," it read. She traced the handwriting, feeling her mother's warmth. The memory propelled her forward. She would reclaim every fragment of herself he tried to steal. Mid-morning, Jenna called with news. David had filed for temporary custody of their dog, Max, claiming Nora abandoned him. Nora's heart clenched. Max had been her solace during dark nights. "I'll fight it," Jenna assured. "We have proof you paid all the bills and cared for him." Relief mingled with dread. Legal battles truly never ended. Later, she took Max for a walk through her neighborhood park. The brisk air rattled bare branches as Max bounded ahead. Nora watched him sniff at a lamppost, tail wagging. She laughed softly. Even the dog sensed freedom. That evening, she confronted the box of photos again. This time, she selected a handful and placed them in a new album, Pieces of Me. She listened to old voicemails from her father, his proud baritone filling her living room. With each message saved, her pulse steadied. This was reclamation, one memory at a time. When the album was full, she closed it with relief. The past was a library she could visit rather than a cell to escape. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A text from David's attorney demanding a deposit to cover Max's care during the custody dispute. Her heartbeat quickened. She stared at the message, then exhaled. She forwarded it to Jenna. "Handled," the reply came. Jenna's unwavering support was Nora's anchor. She tucked her phone away and rose, determined to savor the rest of the night in peace. Before bed, she placed the Pieces of Me album beside her grandmother's locket on the dresser. She whispered into the silence, "I'm still here." Outside, winter's first snow began to fall, flakes drifting past her frosted window. They melted on the ledge, disappearing like the chains David cast on her. She slid beneath her quilt, heart full of memories and hope. Tomorrow, she'd face new challenges, but tonight belonged to every version of herself David tried to erase. The following morning, Nora awoke to a flurry of digital notifications, emails from Jenna, Jenna's assistant, and even a notice from the courthouse about expedited hearings. She dressed swiftly, choosing a charcoal blazer and tailored trousers. She moved with purpose now, each gesture deliberate. She arrived at Jenna's office just as the sun cleared the skyline. Jenna greeted her with a stack of papers. "He's pushing for fast-track litigation on custody and asset claims." She exhaled. "I expected no less." They dove into strategy. Evidence logs to bolster Max's care record, witness statements from neighbors who heard the slap, and financial audits detailing David's hidden transfers. Jenna noted, "We need to show a pattern, a timeline of coercion and control." Nora nodded, absorbing every detail. She felt sharpened, no longer fragile but focused. Today's work felt like forging armor. By late afternoon, she slipped across the street to a cafe, where Daniel, her former co-worker, waited with a notepad. He briefed her on the nonprofit campaign, an initiative to provide financial literacy workshops to survivors of domestic abuse. Nora's eyes lit. "This is perfect," she said. "Not only do I regain professional purpose, but I also help others in my situation." Daniel smiled. "Your story gives the campaign authenticity." They outlined deliverables, branding, social media plan, workshop outlines. The sense of mission lifted her spirits. Her wounds could fuel positive change. That evening, Nora returned home to find Max barking at the door. She knelt and hugged him, inhaling his dog-scented fur. He licked her cheek, tail wagging furiously. Her heart swelled. She'd feared fighting David would cost her everything, even her loyal companion. But here he was, safe by her side. She closed the door and settled onto the couch, Max curling at her feet. She opened her laptop and drafted an email to workshop facilitators. Words flowed easily. "I know what it feels like to be silenced. Together, we'll rewrite our futures." She paused, smiling at her reflection in the screen's glow. This Nora was fearless. Later, David's attorney left a voicemail threatening contempt if she continued harassing David by running public campaigns. She listened, breathing steadily. Jenna's mantra echoed in her mind. Evidence, not emotion. She muted the voicemail and deleted it. David could rage, but she refused distraction. Tomorrow she would file the nonprofit's registration and cement her new path. Before bed, she fetched her journal and wrote, "I choose purpose over fear." She underlined the phrase 3 times. She felt a shift, from victim to advocate, from haunted to empowered. Outside, the moonlight shimmered on lingering snow. Inside, Nora drifted into sleep, Max curled by her side, secure in the knowledge that each day she reclaimed more of her life. 2 weeks later, Nora received notice. The final divorce hearing date had been set. The same day, David requested an in-person mediation, one last attempt to reach a settlement. Jenna advised caution. Meet, but record everything and have legal counsel present. Nora agreed. As sunset painted the sky in bruised purples, she entered the mediation room, neutral territory in a downtown high-rise. David sat at the far end, expression unreadable. Between them, a mediator in crisp attire shuffled papers. Nora took a seat opposite David, Jenna at her side. The mediator began. "I'm here to help both parties agree on asset division and custody of Max." He glanced at David. "Mr. Duncan?" David steepled his fingers. "I propose I keep the house. You take full rights to the business assets. We split the liquid accounts 50/50. As for Max, I recommend joint custody." The mediator nodded. "Mrs. Duncan?" Nora inhaled. She'd expected this. She met David's gaze. No apology, only calculation. She spoke deliberately. "I will give up any claim to the house. I need a clean break. The business assets are yours. I request full custody of Max. The liquid accounts should remain in my control to cover legal and living expenses." David's eyes narrowed. "That's unbalanced." The mediator interjected. "Let's discuss numbers." Negotiations stretched into hours. Arguments over apartment lease terms, legal fees, and even small heirlooms. At one point, David leaned forward. "You're negotiating like a shark." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm negotiating like someone who refuses to be broken again." David's jaw tightened. Jenna chimed in with documented evidence. The home had been purchased under false pretenses, and the dog's primary caregiver was Nora. The mediator weighed the facts and called a recess. In the hallway, Nora sank onto a bench. Her chest fluttered with nerves. Jenna crouched beside her. "You're doing great." Nora closed her eyes, steadying her pulse. She thought of her mother's letter and her father's pride. She thought of Marissa's support and Max's loyalty. She would not shrink now. Back inside, they returned to the table. The mediator presented a final proposal. Apartment lease in Nora's name. Liquid assets split 60/40 in her favor. Full custody of Max. And legal fees covered by David. He set a deadline. Sign now or reconvene. David glared, then looked at Nora. In that instant, she saw something flicker, regret or respect. He leaned back and signed. Then Jenna slid the paper across. Nora picked up the pen. Her hand hovered, then wrote her name with conviction. As everyone rose, David met her eyes. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He simply nodded. It was the closest he'd come to remorse. Nora nodded back, chest tight. She retrieved her coat and walked past him. Outside, the last rays of sun glowed on her face, warm and freeing. She'd faced him one final time and stood unbroken. The day after mediation, Nora awoke before sunrise. She brewed coffee and stepped onto her balcony, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The city below was quiet, mist rising from asphalt. In her hand, she held the signed settlement agreement, final, irrevocable. Her breath caught as she reread the terms: freedom, custody, and financial independence. The paper felt like a relic of a life she'd shed. She exhaled slowly, watching sunrise streak gold across gray buildings. Back inside, Max padded into the room, tail wagging. Nora knelt and hugged him close. "We did it, boy," she whispered. He licked her cheek, offering comfort and unconditional love. She smiled, feeling a tear slip free. It wasn't sadness. It was the release of years' worth of tension. She opened her laptop and drafted a final email to Jenna. "Thank you for giving me back my life." Seconds later, a reply arrived. "You earned it." Jenna's words were a mirror of Nora's own journey. Hard-fought and hard-won. Later that morning, she met Marissa for brunch at their favorite cafe, the one with mismatched chairs and hothouse orchids. They toasted with mimosas. "To you," Marissa said, eyes shining. "To a life rebuilt." Nora clinked glasses. "To freedom." Over eggs Benedict and laughter, Nora felt the future unroll before her. Work on the nonprofit, a permanent home filled with light, new friendships anchored in honesty, and above all, peace. She no longer feared stepping into her own story. She was the author now. She thought of the countless evenings bound by fear, contrasted with this morning's calm certainty. If the past was a storm, she navigated through it and emerged whole. As they parted, Nora walked home under a sapphire sky. She paused at her apartment door, inhaling deeply. Inside, the walls bore her stamps, the gray and sage, framed photos of her true self, and a new plant on the windowsill, symbol of growth. She placed her coffee mug on the table beside the Pieces of Me album. She ran a finger over the embossed title. Each page chronicled her journey, loss, courage, and rebirth. She sat in the middle of the living room floor, legs crossed, and closed her eyes. In the hush, she visualized her path ahead. Workshops filled with survivors, articles telling her story, quiet mornings with Max, and the rhythm of a life chosen freely. She opened her eyes with a smile. The chapters ahead were hers to write, unconstrained by his violence or her past. Today was the dawn of a new life, and Nora stepped into it with open arms and an unbreakable heart. Nora awakened to the soft patter of rain against her window. The gray dawn felt reflective, as though the sky itself remembered her stormy past. She rose, brewed coffee, and stepped onto her balcony, wrapped in a cozy shawl. In the misty morning, the city's contours blurred, a metaphor she welcomed. Today marked 1 year since she left David's house for good. 1 year since the slap. 1 year of court battles, tears, victories, and rebirth. She cradled her mug and exhaled, gratitude mingling with nostalgia. At the nonprofit office later that morning, staff gathered around a long conference table. Posters behind them proclaimed "Empower, Educate, Emerge." Nora stood at the head, heart steady. "Today we launch our first financial literacy workshop," she announced, voice calm but bright. Around her, survivors of abuse, their faces tired but determined, nodded. A hush fell as they realized this day signified more than numbers on spreadsheets. It was proof that brokenness could become purpose. Nora glanced at Daniel, whose supportive smile buoyed her. They dove into the workshop. Nora guided participants through budgeting basics, smart saving, and reclaiming financial autonomy after leaving an abuser. She paused, remembering her own panic when David locked her out of bank accounts. "Control often starts with money," she told the group. "Regaining it is our first step toward freedom." Hands raised with questions about emergency funds, joint accounts, credit rebuilding. Nora fielded each with empathy and expertise. her own story lending authenticity to every answer. The room buzzed with energized chatter when they broke for coffee. Afterward, Nora retreated to a quiet corner with her journal. She wrote, "1 year ago, a single action changed everything. Today, that action has rippled outward to dozens of women changing their paths." She pressed her pen to the page and smiled. Outside, the rain subsided, and a sliver of sunlight pierced steel clouds. Nora closed her journal, heart warmed. That afternoon, she visited the courthouse to drop off final paperwork. Confirmation that all assets had been divided and legal matters closed. The receptionist greeted her with a knowing nod. As she stepped into the lobby, memories of courtroom tension surfaced. But today, she felt calm, vindicated by justice and proud of her resilience. She lingered for a moment, breathing in the antiseptic air, and whispered to the empty benches, "Thank you." Then she left, determination intact. Back at her apartment, Max greeted her with an enthusiastic bark. She knelt and hugged him, laughing as he licked her face. He tugged at her shawl, tail wagging. "All right, boy, time for celebration," she said, rising. She retrieved a key to a quaint cafe bakery down the street, one of her first indulgences when newly free. Inside, the baker presented her with a special cake. 1-year freedom cake, hand-painted in pastel icing. Nora's eyes glistened. She hugged the baker, then turned the cake toward Max, who nosed it curiously. That evening, Marissa and Jenna joined at Nora's dining table. Candles flickered, laughter danced through the cozy apartment, and memories found new context. They sliced the cake, toasting with sparkling cider. "To Nora," Jenna said, raising her glass. "To your courage and generosity." Marissa smiled through tears. "You inspire us all." Nora lifted her glass, voice steady. "To every survivor who finds her strength." They clinked glasses. The night closed with Nora on the balcony, cold air swirling but her shawl snug. The city lights sparkled below, each window a story, each life a possibility. She pressed a hand to her heart. 1 year ago, a slap shattered her world. Tonight, standing beneath a sky cleared by rain, she realized that moment had forged her into someone stronger. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, ready to step ever forward. Sunlight streamed through her living room as Nora unrolled a yoga mat. The session she'd started months ago, once shaky and hesitant, now felt grounding. She moved through sun salutations with fluid grace, muscles warmed, mind clear. Each breath felt like reclamation of space in her own body. When class ended, she sat cross-legged, palms pressed, eyes closed. Gratitude flooded her, for healing, community, and the simple gift of choice. She bowed her head and whispered, "I am free." Post-yoga, she prepared for a speaking engagement at a local university. Students and faculty awaited her talk, from surviving to thriving. Arriving in the auditorium, she observed eager faces, young adults curious about resilience. She set up her slides, voice amplified through a gentle microphone. "Many stories end with pain," she began, "but ours can transform into purpose." She shared her journey succinctly, focusing on lessons learned, the power of financial autonomy, legal advocacy, and community support. Hands shot up with questions about self-care, boundary setting, and next steps after trauma. At the meet and greet afterward, attendees lined up for photos and conversations. A student named Aisha shared her own history of controlling relationships, and tears turfed out on dorm floors. "Your story gives me hope," she said, eyes shining. Nora squeezed her hand. "You deserve that hope, and so much more." She connected Aisha to one of her nonprofit's mentors, exchanging contacts. As students chatted among themselves, Nora felt a thriving web of shared strength grow. Later that afternoon, she returned to her apartment exhausted but exhilarated. She sank onto the couch, journal in hand, documenting the day's energy. She underlined phrases like choice, empowerment, and community. She noticed Max curled at her feet, head on his paws. She smiled and extended a hand to stroke his fur. He lifted his head and rested it on her lap. They sat in companionable silence, two souls healed by love and loyalty. In the evening, She joined a small rooftop gathering of friends, Marissa, Jenna, Daniel, and Madeline from next door, around a table of tapas and wine. The city skyline glimmered beyond them, a testament to human ingenuity and connection. They toasted to upcoming projects, a summer retreat for survivors, an expansion of financial workshops into neighboring cities, and a podcast series sharing stories of resilience. Ideas flew fast, energy luminous. Nora listened, delighted at how her life had blossomed into collaborative impact. After guests left, she lingered on the rooftop, wind tangling her hair. She gazed at the stars just beginning to appear, thinking of the darkest nights she'd endured, and how they had led her here. A gentle breeze carried distant laughter from a rooftop party. Nora closed her eyes and inhaled, feeling kinship with every life pulse around her. Tomorrow awaited with projects to plan, lives to touch, and quiet moments to savor. She opened her eyes, lips curved. The future was hers to shape, and she would embrace it with all her heart. A crisp Saturday morning found Nora at the community center, transforming a multipurpose room into a hub of activity. Folding chairs lined up in rows, tables draped in bright cloths, and art supplies arranged neatly. Today was the kickoff for the Empowerment Retreat, a weekend for survivors to connect, learn, and heal. Volunteers bustled around her, setting name tags and welcome banners. Nora wore a simple blouse and jeans, a volunteer badge pinned to her chest. She felt energized by the buzz of preparation. As registrants trickled in, each introduced herself, many with nervous smiles and guarded eyes. Nora greeted them all warmly, offering hugs and reassurance. Over coffee and light breakfast, icebreaker activities began, sharing favorite songs, drawing symbols of strength, and partner storytelling. Laughter reverberated off the walls as participants revealed their creativity. Nora observed quietly, marveling at the courage it took to speak one's truth to strangers. The first workshop on self-defense took place outdoors under a canopy of oaks. An instructor demonstrated basic moves. Participants partnered up, learning to block, strike, and assert boundaries. Nora watched a woman named Lydia, who hesitated at first, then found power in her stance. "I never thought I could do this," Lydia whispered to Nora. "I feel strong." Nora squeezed her shoulder. "You always were. It just took practice to believe." Inside, a financial session ran concurrently. Another facilitator guided women through closing abusive joint accounts safely. Nora circulated, offering her own tips and sharing a smile. Each woman left with an action plan and renewed confidence. In the afternoon, a journaling circle invited participants to write letters to their past selves. Quiet tears and soft sniffles accompanied scratchings of pen on paper. When the time came to share excerpts, voices trembled then steadied. Nora listened, moved by each testimony. Survivors spoke of leaving, rebuilding, and forgiving themselves. As the sun set, the final session gathered everyone around a candlelit circle. In turn, women spoke affirmations aloud. "I am worthy. I choose joy. I am free." Nora added her own. "I embody strength." The chorus of voices rose, resolute. She realized that her work had created ripples beyond her own healing. Here in this room, lives were rekindled by communal resolve. That evening, as the center emptied, volunteers and attendees lingered, exchanging numbers and hugs. Nora packed leftover supplies, exhausted but fulfilled. Max's tag-along from next door chased stray markers under the chairs, eliciting laughter. She scooped him up. "Ready to go home, buddy," he barked softly. She smiled broadly. Driving home, Nora reflected on the day's transformations, Lydia's empowerment, the financial breakthroughs, and the solidarity forged in candlelight. Each story added to her own tapestry of purpose. As she tucked Max into his bed and climbed into hers, she closed her eyes with a sense of quiet triumph. Strength, she knew, was not solitary. It thrived in community, and she was grateful for every voice that had joined hers. A gentle summer breeze ruffled Nora's hair as she stood at the edge of the cliffside overlook that had become her favorite sanctuary. Below, waves crashed against craggy rocks, sending salty mist into the air. She inhaled deeply, letting the vastness of ocean and sky fill her senses. Today was her day off, a rare gift since launching the nonprofit. She'd invited Marissa for a mini retreat, and now Marissa joined her, both clutching steaming mugs of tea. This view never gets old, Nora mused, watching seabirds soar. Marissa nodded, eyes bright. And neither do your achievements. Nora smiled wryly. Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come. They sat on a weathered bench, tea warming their hands. Silence wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Nora reflected on the night she fled David's house, heart pounding, world upside down. Would she have imagined this? An empire of support, workshops changing lives, personal peace so palpable? After a while, Marissa nudged her. Time for a promise? She pulled a small velvet pouch from her bag and offered it. Nora opened it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet engraved, "Free to soar." Tears sprang to Nora's eyes. It's beautiful. Marissa slipped it onto her wrist. For every time you doubt yourself, feel this and remember you're unstoppable. Nora clasped her friend's hand. Thank you. They hiked a trail winding along the shoreline, wildflowers brushing their legs. Nora talked about expanding to other regions. Marissa shared company news. Their conversation weaved between plans and laughter, comfortable as an old song. They paused at a wooden bridge, craning necks to watch dolphins play offshore. Look, Marissa whispered, pointing. Nora's breath caught. She dreamed of dolphins, symbols of freedom and joy. Now they leapt in a choreographed ballet. Tears glistened in her eyes, but they were tears of triumph. That afternoon, back at Nora's apartment, she found a letter slipped under the door, an acceptance from a regional grant program providing funds to scale her nonprofit's workshops. She reread the letter, heart fluttering. She called Jenna first. We did it, she whispered. Jenna's laughter crackled through. I knew you would. Then she called the grant officer to confirm. It was official, doors opening wider. Later that evening, she hosted a small celebration on her balcony. Fairy lights strung overhead, a modest spread of food and wine. Volunteers and close friends gathered. Music played softly. Toasts erupted, to Nora's vision, compassion, and tenacity. Glasses clinked, and laughter floated into the night sky. Nora raised her own glass, to freedom, and to every soul courageous enough to claim it. Her voice trembled with emotion. They cheered. After guests departed, Nora lingered on the balcony, bracelet glinting in moonlight. In the distance, city lights shimmered against the bay. She closed her eyes, imagining herself as one of those seabirds, wings unfurled, riding thermals of possibility. The past had been dark waters, but now she soared above them. She pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, I am free. And with that affirmation, she stepped into the life she had forged, wings spread, heart open, destiny hers to define. A soft golden sunrise bathed her apartment in warmth as Nora sipped her final morning coffee of the retreat weekend. Today she returned to her routine, but nothing felt routine anymore. She lingered by her window, eyes tracing the horizon where skyscrapers met skies. Every dawn now held promise rather than dread. She recalled the first day she woke in exile, fear and uncertainty heavy in her chest. Now those feelings had dissolved into gratitude for each new day. She gathered her things and headed to the nonprofit's headquarters, buzzing with post-retreat energy. Volunteers unpacked materials, cleaned rooms, and shared stories of breakthroughs. Nora moved among them, offering hugs and high fives. At her office desk, she found an envelope labeled for future you. Inside was a handwritten note from her past self, dated the week she fled David. It read, One day, this pain will become your power. Keep going. She pressed the letter to her heart, tears of joy mingling with triumph. The girl who wrote those words had been broken. The woman reading them was unbreakable. Mid-morning, she held a press briefing announcing the nonprofit's expansion into 3 additional cities. Cameras clicked as she outlined plans for workshops, partnerships, and digital resources. She spoke with poise. Survivors deserve safety, financial autonomy, and community. We will deliver all 3. Reporters scribbled furiously. Afterwards, a journalist approached. Your story inspired my sister to leave her abusive partner, he said softly. Nora blinked. Thank you, she replied. That moment crystallized her impact beyond numbers and programs. It lived in lives changed. That afternoon, she visited a coffee shop where Aisha, the student from her university talk, waited with 2 coffees. They sat at a corner table. Aisha's project, a campus support group, was flourishing. Your talk saved me, she said. Nora squeezed her hand. And now you're saving others. They discussed collaboration. Nora couldn't imagine a more meaningful legacy than seeing survivors empower their peers. As evening settled, Nora returned home with Max trailing behind. She changed into comfortable clothes and carried her yoga mat to the balcony. The sky blazed in sunset hues. She moved through familiar stretches, then sat cross-legged, closing her eyes. She pictured every chapter, each battle and victory, woven into a tapestry of resilience. In her mind's eye, she saw David's silhouette vanish behind her as she marched onward. When she opened her eyes, the city lights shimmered like fireflies. She whispered an ode to freedom, to mornings reclaimed, voices unearthed, and hearts mended. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling steady thumps of life and love. Max nudged her hand, reminding her of simple joys. She smiled and stroked his fur. Tonight, she would sleep without fear, knowing every tomorrow belonged to her. She had written her story in courage and compassion. The final word hung in the air like a promise, free. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains as Nora woke to a familiar hum of life beyond her window. Today was the gala for her nonprofit's 1-year anniversary, a celebration of impact, survival, and community. She rose with calm determination, dressed in a deep emerald sheath that echoed growth and renewal. As she braided her hair, she thought of the countless women whose stories had woven into her own tapestry of resilience. Each workshop, each support circle, each courageous "I am free" had collectively built something far larger than herself. Arriving at the grand ballroom, she stepped beneath crystal chandeliers and was greeted by a chorus of applause. Survivors, volunteers, board members, and supporters filled the room, faces bright with gratitude and pride. Photos from the early days, empty chairs, handfuls of guests, shown atop easels, contrasted with today's full house. At the podium, Daniel, her steadfast ally, introduced her with heartfelt sincerity. Nora Duncan transformed pain into purpose, he said, voice thick. Tonight we honor her vision and every life she's touched. Nora's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. This night wasn't about her alone. It was about a legacy in motion, propelled by countless acts of courage. She shared the stage with survivors who had turned their trauma into advocacy. Aisha, now running a campus support group, Lydia, teaching self-defense workshops across the state, and Jamila, spearheading a safe housing initiative for those fleeing abuse. One by one, they recounted their journeys, their gratitude evident in trembling voices. When Jamila stepped forward, tears in her eyes, she handed Nora a framed collage. Photos of every participant, every volunteer, every smiling face formed into a mosaic. "This is our heartbeat," she whispered. Nora accepted it, heart swelling. After speeches, the gala shifted to a banquet of heartfelt toasts. Glasses of sparkling cider clinked, and laughter wove through the room. Survivors paired at tables reminisced about that first workshop, when Nora had simply told them they mattered. Tonight, that simple message had blossomed into programs in 3 neighboring regions and an online platform reaching thousands. Journalists captured every moment, yet Nora found herself less concerned with headlines and more with a woman at table 8, a quiet attendee who had just survived her first night without fear. Their eyes met, and the woman mouthed, "Thank you." In that silent exchange, Nora felt a profound affirmation. Impact wasn't measured in numbers alone, but in lives reclaimed. As the evening wound down, Nora slipped away to the balcony, the cool night air a balm. Below, lanterns lit the courtyard where volunteers laughed over late tea. She closed her eyes and inhaled, savoring the night's warmth. From behind, Daniel joined her, handing her a glass of herbal tea. "You've done something extraordinary," he said softly. Nora exhaled. We've done something extraordinary." She took his hand, gratitude coursing through her veins. Tonight, the gala concluded not with an end, but with a beginning, renewed commitments, expanded visions, and lives forever altered. Nora looked up at the star-speckled sky, whispering a promise to carry this legacy forward, one brave step at a time. The next morning, Nora awoke before dawn, the sky still a soft gradient of indigo and rose. She tied back her hair and laced her boots. Today she would visit the new outreach center in a neighboring town, one of 3 launched since the gala. A road trip channeled a sense of adventure she hadn't felt since long before David's betrayal. Max rode shotgun, ears flapping in the breeze as they hit the highway. In the small town of Crestwood, the outreach center stood bright against a backdrop of rolling hills, a brick building adorned with empowering banners, and a garden cultivated by volunteers. Children's laughter echoed from a reading nook. In another room, women gathered around laptops for virtual workshops. As Nora entered, she was met with a chorus of excited greetings. "Ms. Duncan, welcome," they called. She knelt to hug the children first, then shook hands with the volunteers, each introducing themselves with pride. A tour led her through offices where financial counseling sessions happened, through meditation spaces where survivors practiced mindfulness, and through a kitchenette where fresh coffee and tea offered comfort. In one corner, a young mother cradled her infant while attending a parenting workshop, her face serene. Next to her, a grandmother offered reassurance. "This place saved me," the grandmother said quietly. Nora nodded, voice thick. "And you're saving others." Their eyes locked in shared purpose. After a lively lunchtime panel on trauma-informed care, Nora stepped into the center's backyard garden. Volunteers had planted sunflowers, marigolds, and geraniums, bright petals stirring in the breeze. A volunteer handed Nora a trowel and a packet of seeds. Together with a small group, she dug into the earth. Each seed planted symbolized hope, growth, and the knowledge that healing, like a garden, needed nurturing over time. As she pressed a seed into fertile soil, she felt roots of her own resolve grow deeper. Before leaving, the center's coordinator presented Nora with a handmade quilt, stitched with fabric squares bearing messages from participants. "I am brave. I choose joy. I am free." The quilt was warmth embodied. Nora wrapped it around her shoulders, tears in her eyes. "This is beauty born of pain," she said softly. The coordinator nodded. "And it will keep us warm through every season." Driving home, Nora reflected on new horizons, this center, the 2 others launched last month, and plans for a mobile unit to reach rural communities. Each initiative was another step on her journey, from violence to vision. Max yawned in the passenger seat, loyal by her side. As the sun climbed higher, Nora whispered, "Onwards, friend." He barked in agreement. Back at her apartment, she folded the quilt and placed it in a special corner of her living room, a reminder that new horizons blossomed from seeds sown with courage. A crisp autumn breeze rattled the windows as Nora prepared for her first national podcast recording, an interview series where survivors could share their stories and advocate for change. She reviewed her questions one last time, packaging vulnerability into structure. A small team transformed her living room into a makeshift studio, microphone stands, soundproofing panels, and a ring light that bathed the space in warmth. Max curled at her feet, offering silent support. The first guest, Elena, arrived, her eyes bright despite trembling hands. She recounted her journey, from isolation to empowerment, tears glistening as she described her first support group meeting. Nora guided the conversation gently, asking open-ended questions that allowed Elena's strength to shine. "When I spoke my truth," Elena said, voice steady, "I reclaimed my identity." Behind the microphone, that simple declaration echoed with profound resonance. As they wrapped up, Nora thanked Elena and signaled the next guest, Darius, a man who had survived emotional abuse and become an advocate for Father's mental health support. His presence shattered stereotypes. His testimony wove into the broader narrative. Abuse crossed gender lines. The podcast aimed to amplify diverse voices, showing that healing and advocacy belong to everyone. When Darius spoke of finding compassion for himself, Nora nodded, moved by his courage. Recording continued into the afternoon, each guest adding a strand to a tapestry of resilience. Between takes, Nora sipped herbal tea and checked messages, new podcast subscriptions, encouraging notes from listeners, and a request from a major network to feature her series. Her heart soared. This platform would extend her impact beyond geographic borders. At the end of the day, the team gathered for a quick debrief. "You created a space for authenticity," the producer said. "Listeners are already responding." Nora exhaled, gratitude flooding her. She slung a cardigan over her shoulders and knelt to scratch Max behind his ears. "We did it," she whispered. Later, she posted a teaser on social media, an edited clip of Elena's declaration. Comments began pouring in. "Your story gave me courage. Thank you for this platform. I'm not alone." Nora closed her eyes and let the warmth settle. The power of voice was undeniable. Stories once hushed became beacons of hope. That night, Nora penned in her journal, "Our voices carry us forward." She placed the journal beside her grandmother's locket and the Pieces of Me album. Outside, the city lights twinkled like affirmations. She drifted to sleep knowing her message would reach ears longing for validation and strength. Winter settled in swiftly, frosting the city in glittering white. Nora arrived at the annual Legislative Summit on Domestic Abuse Policy, her first time addressing lawmakers directly. She wore a tailored coat and a determined expression. Her seat in the crowded chamber placed her beside advocates, legal experts, and survivors who had traveled from across the state. The summit's theme: Breaking Chains, Transforming Justice. Posters bore silhouettes of hands unlocking shackles. Nora inhaled deeply, drawing courage. When her turn came, she stepped to the podium. Microphones buzzed, cameras captured every gesture. She began by recounting her own story, the night she walked away from humiliation and violence. She described the struggles, the courtroom battles, the threat-laden calls, the emotional toll. Then she spoke of victory, the restraining order, the expanded nonprofit, the lives changed through workshops and centers. Her voice grew firmer with each detail. "We must transform our laws to prioritize survivor safety, rapid legal intervention, and financial protection." She cited data and personal anecdotes, blending emotion with policy rigor. Lawmakers listened intently. Some nodded, others scribbled notes. Nora proposed concrete measures: expedited protective orders, mandatory financial counseling for both parties, increased funding for support centers, and expanded legal aid for low-income survivors. She challenged the assembly. "We can break chains not only of metal but of shame, silence, and economic control." Applause rippled through the hall. During the panel discussion that followed, a senior senator praised her proposals. "Your lived experience and expertise make you a formidable advocate," he said. Nora offered gratitude. Yet she emphasized collaboration. Lawmakers, advocates, and survivors must stand united. As the summit concluded, delegates swarmed her with questions and pledge cards. A young aide approached, handing Nora a petition petitioning for new legislation. "Your testimony inspired us," she said shyly. Nora accepted it with a hug. "Let's keep pushing," she replied. Exiting the summit into the cold night, Nora realized her journey had come full circle, from powerless witness to powerful change maker. Each step, from that first slap to this podium, had built her resolve. She pressed a hand to her heart, frost dusting her sleeve. Chains could be broken, and she was living proof. Spring's first blossoms unfurled as Nora stepped onto the stage of an outdoor amphitheater to a cheering crowd. Today marked the public launch of Freedom's Song, a documentary spotlighting survivors' stories woven with the nonprofit's journey. A large screen displayed stills, Nora's trembling hand slipping out of David's grip, volunteers planting seeds alongside her, survivors sharing tears and laughter. The trailer played, and the audience sat enraptured as raw testimony transitioned into scenes of sunlight, growth, and collective triumph. As credits rolled, the amphitheater erupted into standing ovations. Nora felt tears sting her eyes as she joined the stage alongside 10 survivors featured in the film, women and men whose faces now beamed with pride. A hush fell as she raised a hand. "This is our song," she began, voice clear. A song of courage, solidarity, and unbreakable hope. She invited survivors to speak briefly, each sharing a single line. I am free. I am whole. I am powerful. Their words echoed through the night. Afterward, at a reception illuminated by lanterns and the scent of jasmine, guests clustered around Nora and the survivors. Journalists scribbled notes. Local leaders pledged sponsorships. A teenage girl approached, voice trembling. Your story gave me strength to leave my own abusive home. Nora knelt and hugged her. Your song matters, she whispered. Later, staring up at lantern-lit trees, Nora reflected on every chapter of her life, pain and empowerment intertwined. The slap had been a cruel overture. Freedom's song was the triumphant finale. She breathed deeply, recalling the soft lilt of survivors' voices singing affirmations at the documentary's close. She could still hear it. We are free. We are whole. We are powerful. Those words reverberated in her chest. Max trotted to her side, nose nudging her hand. She stroked his fur. We did it, boy, she murmured. Her heart swelled with gratitude for every ally, Marissa, Jenna, Daniel, Madeline, and for every stranger-turned friend who had sung this song alongside her. As lanterns flickered out one by one, Nora raised her eyes to the stars. The night sky seemed to applaud, each distant light a promise of countless tomorrows. Freedom's song would continue in every life it touched, an anthem for generations. And Nora, its composer, would listen always to its echoes as she moved forward, forever free, forever singing. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, comment, and share. Also turn on the bell to get more of our videos. See you in the next story.